A big thank you to Commissioner McGuinness and to Chairman Servet. Both mentioned normal people, the common man on the street, the common woman on the street. And so I'm going to take the opportunity for a little bit of shameless advertisement. DG FISMA produces a podcast. Strangely enough, I'm the host of the podcast. So it's called the EU Finance Podcast, and I do think that it is relevant to today's conference because we do try to talk about financial matters in a way that is understandable to the common man, because I'm not a financial expert, so I invite the experts to come explain to somebody like me, a normal guy, who has enough brains to get in trouble in finance, but also enough to understand when it's put well. I highly suggest that you tune in, like and subscribe. Now, to our next step. We're going to hear an overview about financial resilience in Europe. That overview will be presented by Maria Demertzis. She is a senior fellow at Bruegel and a professor of economic policy at the Florence School of Transnational Governance at the European University Institute. Now, just a quick note, the slides that you will be seeing during her presentation will indeed be made available by Bruegel. Maria, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the introduction. Thank you very much for inviting me, Commissioner, Mr. Servet. This is a very important event, and I share your passion about financial literacy. I'm a macroeconomist, and it goes without saying that financial literacy is a very important tool in promoting financial stability, but also greater economic stability. I wanted also to thank the Belgian presidency, particular thank you to them, because beyond this event today and tomorrow, at the end of the week, finance ministers and central bank governors will be hearing about financial literacy, and I'm very glad that this is effectively a financial literacy week here in Brussels. And also a personal thank you to you, Commissioner. You have brought financial literacy to Brussels. I think I'm not alone in saying that, and I think the financial stability will be served very well for doing that. I'm not here to convince you about the importance of financial stability. I have of money matters in financial literacy. I just want to give you an overview of the latest data that the European Commission has produced, and for that I'm also very thankful, because without data, of course, we cannot monitor, we cannot see the progress. The survey that the European Commission did back in spring of last year asks 5 questions that are very standard in this literature. Most of you will know this, to measure what we call financial knowledge. How much do we know about financial issues? These are very standard questions. We ask how people understand the concept of the compound interest, inflation, the relationship between interest rates and bonds, risk versus return, and what is diversification. And the numbers that you see here at the next to each of these questions is how many, on average, in the EU answered the relevant questions correctly. So you see that 45% answered the compound interest questions correctly, 65% answered the inflation question correctly. The relationship between interest rate and bonds, only 20% answered correctly. Admittedly, this is a very difficult question, and it is deliberately so. The relationship between risk return was also very well answered, 66%. And then finally, the issue of diversification, what it is, 56% answer the questions correct. Now, we now go beyond that and ask, what is financial literacy, financial knowledge in terms of being sufficient? And in our approach that I will be using today, I would answer that question by saying that if people answer at least 3 questions correctly, three of these questions correctly, I would consider that sufficient. Maybe not optimal, but sufficient. When it comes to this, only 52% on average in the EU answered at least three questions correctly. So 1 in 2 people in the EU, based on the EU survey, will be deemed financially knowledgeable. And these are the numbers, again, in pretty colors. The 52% is an average on the EU. Like with all things in the EU, there is vast discrepancies between countries. It goes down to 38% all the way to 72% in terms of how many people per country answered these more than 3 questions correctly. There's very, very few that have answered all 5 correctly, and also there's very, very few that have answered no question correctly. 52 answered at least 3 questions correctly. Now, I want to pick on a few things. You will read the EFSER report by the European Commission, where they actually take you through all the results. We have picked on some of them and tried to analyze them a little bit more to try and understand what we make of them. I pick on the question on inflation for a number of reasons. It is one of the questions that the public answered the most correctly, 65%. And it is a problem that we've had in the macroeconomy for the past 2 years. Because we've had times in the last 2 years where inflation was more than 10%. The question asks if you understand the concept of inflation. 65% answered that question correctly, but I would say that 35% did not answer that question correctly. More than 1 in 3 households, respondents in this survey, have not understood what inflation has done to their savings, what it has done to their purchasing power. And I actually think this is a very big number by comparison to what I would have otherwise expected. If you go in a little bit more into detail, and here I will second some of the things that commissioners said, there is vast differences across different demographics. And here we've picked on 3. Household income, you will see that there is a 15 percentage point difference in answering the inflation question correctly between those that are the poorest and those that are the richest. There is also a 14% difference between ages. The youngest, as the commissioner said, are the ones that are least knowledgeable about the concept of inflation, with the over 55s being those that are the most knowledgeable about the concept of inflation. 14 percentage points difference between the 2 groups. And then finally, the level of education, another 15 percentage point difference between the lowest and the highest, where the lowest level of education is up to middle high school, and the highest is including of tertiary education all the way to a PhD level. So very big differences. But perhaps the most shocking difference, and unfortunately it has been consistent across all surveys, really is the gender gap. On the left-hand side, I have across all the survey who have answered more than 3 questions correctly. And on the right-hand side, I have the inflation question again. 18 percentage points difference come out of the survey in terms of financial knowledge. 3 out of 5 questions, at least 3 out of 5 questions correctly. 18 percentage points between the genders. There is a literature out there is telling us that the women are very likely to pick the I don't know question much more than men. This is also true in the European Commission survey. Women are always more likely to pick the I don't know question, even up to as much as twice as likely to pick the I don't know question than men. So I don't know if you were to remove that, what it would do to the gender gap. Estimates in the literature tell us that it might close about 1/3 of this gap, but it will not close it completely. In the inflation question, the gender gap is a little bit smaller, but again, I think these are numbers that we need to do something about. Then 2 more questions, because I picked on 2 more questions. The commissioner also referred to financial fragility. 2 questions that are in the survey that are of great relevance, and there are many more interesting questions. Financial fragility: can you meet your expenses if you were to have a sudden loss of income? And are you confident that you can be financially safe in your pension years? These are very important questions because the literature has shown us that financial literacy can make a difference. There is causality going between financial literacy and these 2 concepts. On the financial fragility, the numbers: 56% of the respondents have more than 3 months savings if they were to have an unexpected loss of income. This includes the I don't know questions in them. And we put them in this category because we feel that if the I don't know group was distressed, they would have revealed that. But this is just an interpretation. But again, 1 in 2 people is not financially, does not have more than 3 months of savings to meet an unexpected loss of income. This is a big amount. But when it comes to pension security, the numbers are really, really quite disappointing. 43% feel confident on average in the EU that they have sufficient savings for the pension years. If you look closer to the numbers per country, there are countries where this number goes down to 20%. Only 1 in 5 feels confident they have sufficient savings for the pension years. To me, it feels like a time bomb. And here is the correlations between the financial knowledge index of the European Commission and the answers to these two surveys. You really see, and the literature has established a very strong relationship between them. And the reason why I plotted them, I wanted to give you not a very accurate, but some picture of the size of these relationships. For 10 percentage points increase in the financial literacy, you could have 4 percentage points less financially fragile respondent, and up to 6 percentage points more people that report being confident about having savings for the later years. And then I did something, we did in this effort, by the way, there's going to be a paper coming out on Friday where you can read all of this. I have now also looked a little bit on this issue of inclusion. And what you see here is on the x-axis, I have again the financial knowledge index by the European Commission. And on the vertical axis, I have the number of adults who borrow from an institution on the left-hand side, who save in an institution, with an institution, and the number of adults who borrow from an institution on the right-hand side. And again, you see a very strong correlation between the two. For 10 percentage points increase in countries that have got 10 percentage points more financially knowledgeable respondents, you can have up to 13 percentage points more people saving an institution and 7 percentage points more people borrowing from an institution. These are arguments, I remind you, these are not borrowing more, these are more adults borrowing. This is a financial inclusion type of argument. And perhaps the best graph to show this is also the Gini coefficient. I have drawn this graph many times with many indices, the OECD index, the EC, country indices, and you really see that countries that have got more financial literate citizens, they also have, there are societies that are more equal. I will finish by first a request to the European Commission to continue the survey, specialize also on financial digital services. You have some questions in the survey. I think we need more to understand. I spent a lot of effort preparing for this, trying to understand the digital aspect of finance, and I didn't get very far. We need much more to understand vulnerabilities amongst particularly the young who have quick access to the digital financial services. There is good news. The good news is that all EU countries are either have or are in the process of creating a national financial literacy strategy. Here I wanted to say a particular shout out to the OECD. I am Greek, and the last financial literacy strategy developed was with the help of the OECD. I'm very grateful for helping my country develop a strategy on this. This is going to make a big difference, I think. And please collect the data so we can monitor the progress. Thank you very much.